when is it appropriate to include kids at your wedding?
So I think there's a few scenarios. If you're an easygoing couple, then you're going to probably be okay with including kids, because you're not going to kind of have these strict ideas of what your wedding's going to look like. So you might be more flexible. You got to think about kids. They are wild cards, as we have found out. They don't do exactly what you would like.
They do go rogue.
They go rogue. They don't do exactly what you want. So, as long as you are easygoing and feel comfortable with that, then, of course it's great to include kids, and then there's no drama really, right? You don't have to tell people not to bring their kids.
Yeah.
But they are wild cards, so you gotta keep that in mind. If you have a big family, like we were saying, maybe you are the youngest of a couple of siblings, and you have, your older siblings already have kids, or younger siblings already have kids. Who knows? But maybe your siblings have kids, and you have a bunch of nieces and nephews, or you have a big family, and there's just kids of all ages floating around, and that sounds super cool. Probably going to be harder to tell your big, huge family that none of these kids are invited, especially when you think about the logistics of who's going to watch all these kids, since family's all going to be at the wedding. Or maybe you have a super close relationship with your nieces or nephews or friends' kids or whoever these kids are, and they're maybe a part of the bridal party or something like that. Then obviously that's where you want to include kids in your wedding.
Yeah, and actually you do touch on something that's becoming more and more popular is childcare on wedding days. We work closely with Platinum Sitters, and based out of Raleigh, but across North Carolina. They're able to provide vetted sitters that can watch your children in a room. You have to work that out with the venue, though. I know that can kind of change insurance policies. There's a lot of rules there, but what are your thoughts on things like that?
Yeah, I think that offering childcare is a super nice to have. If budget allows, you have a lot of kids. Maybe you want the kids to come to the ceremony, but your party's going till 11 or 12 at night. Most kids aren't going to stay up that late. But you want the parents to have a good time. So I think childcare can make it really a good in between, where you're not telling parents they can't bring their kids, and not giving them a solution. You're telling them they can't bring them, and you're giving them a solution. Not to say it's a necessary thing, but it's certainly a nice addition to that kind of guest experience if you decide to go the route of not including kids in your wedding. And make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And depending on where you host them, if it's on site at the venue, then that can be really nice for parents, because then they can just pop in and check on them, and things like that, which is nice. So little things like that to think through. But again, like you mentioned, you definitely have to think through if that's even possible at your venue. So if it's something you're considering, you want to keep that in mind in that first initial venue search, and kind of ask that question in your first venue meetings.
Yeah, I think that's important. So, is it okay to invite some kids and none at all?
That's a tricky...
Excluding Chloe, of course.
Obviously. That's super tricky. It can lead to a lot of hurt feelings. Generally, no would be my answer. But it's okay if you set rules. So maybe you say only kids under the age, over the age of 8 can come, or only, kids under the age of 1 because they're newborns or whatever, or families' kids can come, but that's that's the end, or whatever. I would just say if you allow some kids to come and not others, that you make sure that the people who have kids that you're not inviting understand prior to the wedding why their kids weren't invited. Because the last thing you want is for them to get a babysitter, show up, and then be like, are you kidding? All these kids are here and my kid wasn't invited. They're going to take that super personally. So make sure if you do go that route, that you set rules, you stick to the rules, and you communicate the rules.
And then I'm going to go rogue here. Shocking. Right, I'm going off script.
Nobody expected that.
This is brand new. This is uncharted territory.
I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope. Now I'm nervous.
Yeah, you should be. How would you handle as the person getting married, or as the planner, when someone brings kids when they say no kids?
Oh, That's kind of the worst.
Have you had that
honestly. Yeah, it's kind of the worst. So my best,
nobody wins.
Nobody wins.
Yeah.
My best advice is to, as the bride or the groom who is there and sees this happening. I feel like the couple always sees the person show up with the bride, with the kid before the ceremony, which just is like the worst possible timing.
Of course.
I wish I could like sneak them in or something. But no, my advice is to just let it go, because there's nothing you can really do at that point.
Right.
Don't let it ruin your day. Things are hopefully not, but most likely something will probably go wrong on wedding day. And so having a professional team, which obviously we vet and make sure happens at Bustld, shameless plug. But no, I think, having a team around you will help make sure that things don't go wrong. But like something like that, can't really control.
Right.
The best thing to do is to kind of just let it go and not dwell on it and deal with it after the wedding. Don't stress about it on your day and like let it ruin your day. One thing that like I try to keep in mind too is like if we have kids that are showing up for the ceremony, like a lot of times as a planner, like I'll know why my couples decided not to have kids.
Right.
So maybe they didn't want a screaming child during their ceremony.
Right.
Fair. So maybe if I like see like a parent arrive with a child, I'll just like kind of say like, hey, they wanted to make sure nobody was like crying during the ceremony. So, if your kid starts crying, do you mind just like stepping out or something like nice like that? You can kind of like deal with that situation depending on, how the parent's feeling. They already know they did something wrong, so they're probably going to be a little sensitive to it and maybe more like amenable to like your request. But my biggest advice is just like, don't let it ruin like the moment before you walk down the aisle or,
right.
When you get to the reception. Just don't let it ruin your night, because that stinks.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're going to be married and you're going to have a great party. So just remember that.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
For sure. So do you need to decide right away if you're going to invite kids? And we've talked a lot about budget and timeline and checklists and all these things. So like, where does this fall in the planning process?
You don't have to decide right away, but I would encourage you to have the discussion pretty early on along the lines of your guest list. So when you start building the guest list, typically you're going to put like everybody, like we've talked about, everybody on there that you could possibly think of, and that's going to include kids. And that usually starts the conversation right there, especially if one of you feels passionately about it.
Right.
So you want to kind of start having that conversation and thinking about like, especially if you have a lot of kids on your guest list. What if you have 20, 25 kids? That can make a big difference on your guest count.
Oh, yeah.
So that could, decide whether or not you can have your venue. So you definitely make a big impact on your budget. So you definitely want to have that conversation in the beginning. Like I mentioned too, you want to know, like, do I need a special room for kids?
Right.
Make sure you ask that question at the venue during the site visit. So like, okay, if we decide not to have kids, we could have a babysitter, or we can't have a babysitter. We need to get a conference room at the hotel or whatever.
Right.
So you kind of have that in the initial planning. You definitely need to know before you send your invitations, because that's where you'll indicate if kids are invited or not.